Hello guys and welcome to my new video, and today we'll be talking about best healers in BfA. Now, this is a relatively early preview and comparison of healers in high-end Mythic rating and high-end Mythic Plus content. And a disclaimer before I start with the video is that I'll be talking about the top-end Mythic progression in raids, in Mythic Plus, healer balance, and it might not affect everyone. It's not going to affect you if you're doing a more casual content, so don't be discouraged if your class is not mentioned here. There is a high chance that you'll be able to complete any of this content or lower content that you decide to do with any possible healer class. But we're looking at the top end, like we're looking at the top 5% or so. So first of all, we'll be looking at the raiding healer balance, then we'll be going over to Mythic Plus healer balance. When we're talking about the Mythic raiding progression, we have to look that before Mythic Uldir opened, there was a lot of healer and DPS balance changes happening. Blizzard announced that they buffed Resto Druids, they buffed Resto Shamans, they buffed Holy Paladins from what they saw, what the data that they gathered from the Heroic Week. They also nerfed Holy Priests and Discipline Priests, and they left Mistweavers untouched. So coming into the Mythic raiding week, guilds had to kind of decide which healers they're going to go with. And overall, I feel the balance is actually pretty good. It was really satisfying to see that the world first Mithrax guild by limit included 5 healers, and all those healers were different specs, with Holy Priest being excluded from that list because they only went with 5 healers. Actually, most of the top end guilds, Methodic Sources and things like that, went with 5 healers for that. And it was really cool to see that the class composition, healer class composition, was very different. There was no class stacking, or at least for majority of guilds there wasn't that much class stacking needed for healers. There was a really weird log that I seen in terms of Pieces guild that actually ended up using 3 Discipline Priests for Mythic Mithrax skill, which was actually very interesting because all the other top end guilds were ended up going with 5 healers. So I'm not sure what strategy they end up using it, but it sounds very interesting. But overall, if you look at the healer balance in Uldir, it's pretty good. A lot of the healers getting a lot of playtime. Healers that were perceived to be pretty bad in Legion, like Mistweaver monks, I've seen a lot of top end play in top guilds. With a lot of the guilds either taking 1 or maybe even 2 Mistweavers for all the fights, and I feel that the community perception of Mistweavers is growing and it's becoming better and better over time. You saw priests being included in a lot of different kills. There has been a lot of use of Holy Priests and Discipline Priests. It's the first time ever where there's been quite a good balance between priest specs. Overall, if you look at some of the logs, if you look at the overall logs for Uldir right now and looking at the overall performance in terms of HPS. Now, when I mention HPS, you have to keep in mind HPS is not the best way to determine healers, but you can kind of look at where each healer excels. You'll notice that Restoration Shamans are at the bottom, and there is a reason for that, because in the recent AMA on Reddit, where Blizzard basically mentioned that they are aware of the fact that Resto Shaman HPS is lagging a little bit behind, and even though they buffed them before the Mythic Week started, the buff wasn't really that significant, and they know about this. But they were kind of scared, at least in the comment section, that when they said it, they were scared about over buffing them because they thought that the Mastery is going to perform better when people taking more damage. Resto Shamans can heal more with their Mastery, and they were scared about over buffing them because they were really strong in PvP. So Resto Shamans in terms of HPS are lagging a little bit behind, and the utility is really strong, and a lot of top end Mythic guilds still bring a Resto Shaman, but in terms of pure HPS, it's a bit at the bottom. Now, Holy Paladins is one of the most asked questions on the stream. Why is that Holy Paladin not doing that much HPS? Why are Holy Paladins at the bottom of the HPS thing? There is a big reason for that, because most of the progression Holy Paladins in Uldir will be using Devotion Aura. Now, Devotion Aura is an amazing raid cooldown that is very powerful when used properly, but it doesn't show up on your SCADA recount details. It doesn't show up on your Warcraft logs, and all of a sudden Holy Paladin might look a little bit weak, and a lot of people in the stream will tell you like, oh, Holy Paladins are doing horrible. But imagine your Resto Druid Tranquility not being shown. Imagine your Holy Priest Holy Salvation not being shown on the meters. There is a big reason why Holy Paladins are a little at the bottom, but they are very strong healers at the moment. There is enough to target constant damage. Your tanks are getting hit on certain bosses really hard, and Holy Paladins are definitely a really strong healer right now, even if their healing meters don't look that great. You can use tools like WoW Analyzer to really check the true potential of Devotion Aura and things like that, so keep that in mind. Holy Paladins are very strong at the moment. Now, if you look at things like Restoration Druids are still doing very well. They're kind of shifted into this more cooldown oriented healing style where Tranquility is really strong, and in fights where you can properly use your inner piece, 2-minute Tranquility, and combine it with Flourish, Resto Druids have been doing really well. So Resto Druid kind of shifted into this more cooldown oriented healing style where if you don't know how to use your cooldowns properly, you will suffer, but if you do know how to use it, you'll see really good numbers. So keep that in mind. Make sure to look at the fight damage patterns before playing a Restoration Druid or going into Mythic raids and things like that. Now, if you really want to look at Discipline Priests have been really strong lately actually. If you look at the first logs, or if you look at the healer performance for the first 2 bosses, which are not really that healing intensive, Talok and Mother, the damage there is relatively controlled and it's not that much of damage, and the healers are kind of balanced in terms of healing. Now keep in mind, the logs that I present you on this video, there's not that much information here. There hasn't been that many logs recorded, so they can change constantly. Keep that in mind. But now if you go into these more constant AoE fights, you start noticing that on fights like Zekvos or Vectis, where there is much more healing to be done, Discipline Priests have really kind of shot up in terms of HPS and they're doing really good healing, followed by Holy Priests. And there has been some guilds that have started stacking Discipline Priests to some extent. Now, there hasn't been crazy stacking on it like that, so in terms of healer balance, I still say the healer balance is really good. Maybe with Resto Shaman HPS falling behind but being brought up by their utility, but overall it does not feel like anyone's really down in terms of raid utility. Now if we go to the Mythic Plus scene, Mythic Plus scene is a lot different right now, mainly because the reason that makes a healer great in raiding scenario might not be the reasons that make them great in a Mythic Plus scenarios, and utility becomes a big thing. And first of all, before talking about the healers that have been used the most in high-end Mythic Plus keys, I have to mention that Mythic damage patterns and the whole concept of Mythic Plus dungeons has changed a lot from Legion. In Legion we saw, especially on tyrannical keys, bosses one-shotting everybody. Like certain bosses will do one-shot mechanics every 20 seconds. You'll need to have trinkets that prevent death or apply a shield to someone. You need to have strong personal cooldowns. And Legion was like that. Now, in BfA, there's definitely been a shift away from that. There's not that many one-shot mechanics happening, even in things like plus 15 tyrannical keys. There are certain mechanics that can be very punishing, but not to the same extent that it was in Legion. And all of a sudden, having strong personal cooldowns, having strong mitigation abilities is not as important. It's still very important concept or part of Mythic Plus pushing and Mythic Plus healer balance, but it's not as big as it was in Legion. So all of a sudden now you have this more, how do you optimize your pulse? How do you do as much damage as possible? How do you really push your DPS even as a healer? Because all of a sudden it's more about completing the dungeon in time rather than just getting killed by a certain mechanic. So that's a very interesting concept that changed. Overall, I've been looking at a lot of the top end keys. Like, we're talking about the highest keys that have been pushed right now are among like plus 16s in time, which is actually really incredible. And the healing balance has been pretty strong overall. I feel there's been 4 healers that have been really highly represented. And if you look at the graph for the unique class population in terms of healers at like Mythic 15s, Mythic 10s, 11s, 12s, 13s, or whatever, you'll see that Discipline Priest, Holy Paladins, Mistweaver Monks, and Resto Druids have a really high representation for those keys, while Resto Shamans and Holy Priests are kinda lagging behind. And there's a reason for that. First of all, if you're playing a Priest and you're looking to push a really high Mythic Plus dungeon, you'll most likely swap to Discipline, because Discipline is extremely strong. It provides a lot of utility, it has arguably better survivability cooldowns, and it can provide really good damage. And overall, Discipline has been the preferred spec for really high end. I'm talking about really high end Mythic Plus keys. If you're Holy Priest, don't be discouraged. You can still do that plus 10s, plus 11s, plus 12s. But Discipline, Disc might be a little bit better. And in terms of Resto Shamans, a lot of the toolkit that makes them great in raiding scenarios, like Healing Rain, Chain Heal, and things like that, they are relatively harder to optimize in a Mythic Plus dungeon. So while it's possible to do a really high Mythic Plus as a Resto Shaman, you might have an easier time with some other healers. So you can keep that in mind. But overall, the 4 other healing specs have been performing really, really well. Every healer has certain good points and bad things. Like Mistweaver's single target healing is extremely, extremely good. Resto Druid overall is doing really well in terms of healing, in terms of DPS as well. Holy Paladin, again, Beacon of Virtue is godlike. And also the fact that they're one of the healers that has an offensive cooldown in terms of Wings or Avenging Crusader to deal damage is extremely strong as well. So overall, every healer has a bad and a good point about them, and those healers can still push really high-end content. So overall, in terms of all of the healer balance for raids, for really high-end Mythic raids, for really high-end Mythic Plus keys and things like that, I would say majority of healers is doing really, really well. I guess maybe the one healer that might have gotten the short end of the stick would probably be a Restoration Shaman with a low representation for high-end Mythic Plus keys. And maybe when we're looking in terms of HPS, their HPS is not the best right now, and Blizzard even acknowledged that as well. But their utility is strong, and they're being brought into high-end Mythic Plus Mythic Uldir raids, so they're still very viable, and for a lot of people, they're still a very fun class to play. So keep that in mind. So thank you guys for watching this video. Let me know how you feel about this healer discussion. It is a discussion, and I want to hear your comments about this. I want to hear your opinions about the healers that you find most fun, most viable, or maybe even overpowered to some extent. Let me know. Thank you for watching this guide, and I'll see you in my next video.